This world is not what it was meant to be. All this pain, all this suffering. There's a better place waiting for me in heaven. Every tear will be wiped away. Every sorrow and sin erased. We'll dance on trust here in the mystery. I will trust in you completely. Awake my soul to sing with your breath in me. I will worship. You taught my feet to dance upon disappointment. I will worship. Let the weary rise. With their eyes to see. Your love crushing every lie, every doubt and fear.
Hey everyone, we just want to welcome you in to church right now, and if you're sitting outside, I always want to invite you to come on in as we begin our worship. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Pastor Abraham. I'm the lead pastor here at Sun Valley, and I just want to give you a warm welcome to all of those who are here present, to all of those who are currently outside that are coming in, and for all of you who are tuning in through our live stream program as well. I just want to thank you so much for choosing us to worship today. And so we just want to open up our worship service today with a quick word of prayer. So let's just bow our heads. God, I want to thank you so much for all that you have done for us. I want to thank you so much for being such an amazing and loving God. And so today we come before you to worship you, to praise you, and to honor you for all that you've done and for all who you are, God. And so we just pray that our praises may bless you. Amen.
Take it off mute. There we go. Good morning, everybody. Happy Sabbath. How many people enjoyed the sunshine this week? Oh my goodness. It's just like warmth through my soul. It was absolutely amazing. Just join with us this morning in praising, whatever that looks like for you. If it's sitting with your eyes closed or standing with your hands raised, just feel comfortable to worship as God calls you to this morning.
Nature and all created things.
It's been an interesting week, and I was just telling Beth actually that a few of us from work attended a conference this week in Toronto. So we got there Sunday night, and we are sitting in our meetings on Monday afternoon, and all of a sudden we start getting texts from people. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? And we're like, what's going on? Because we're in a conference bubble. Ever been in a conference bubble? Yeah. So we don't know what's going on, and I checked the news and learned about the incident in Toronto with the bus and all of that. And it shocked me quite a bit, honestly. I had a bit of a hard time that afternoon knowing that this is happening right down the street. So, this song, it talks about how we can sing in the troubled times and we can sing in the good times. We can sing when things are going well. We can sing when we're struggling, and we can sing just because we know that no matter what happens, we always have a Father who loves us and is with us and has a plan and can make good come from anything bad. So join us in singing, How Can I Keep From Singing? And no matter what your week was like, just take that bridge to heart as we sing.
There is an endless song echoes in my soul. I hear the music ring, and though the storms may come, I am holding on to the rock I cling. How can I keep from singing your praise? How can I ever say enough? How amazing is your love? How can I keep from shouting your name? I know I am loved by the King, and it makes my heart want to sing. I will lift up my eyes in the darkest night, for I know my Savior reigns. And I will walk with you, knowing you'll see me through, and sing the songs you give. How can I keep from singing your praise? How can I ever say enough? How amazing is your love? How can I keep from shouting your name? I know I am loved by the King, and it makes my heart want to sing. I can sing in the troubled times, sing when I win. I can sing when I lose my step and fall down again. I can sing when you pick me up, sing that you're there. I can sing 'cause you hear me, Lord, when I call to you in prayer. I can sing with my last breath, sing, for I know that I'll sing with the angels and the saints around the throne. How can I keep from singing your praise?
like to worship here at Sun Valley is by giving back through our tithes and through our offerings. And we just believe that God has been so gracious, has been so good, has been so lavishly giving in our lives through so many different ways that we just find it a privilege and an honor to worship God by giving back monetarily to support the ministries that he has here through this church and this community. And so if you would like to partner with us in giving back, there are a few ways that you can do that. You can either give online through adventistgiving.ca. You can give in person through either cash donations or through our envelopes as well, so you can designate exactly where you would like it to go. Or you can also give through our Square app, which is available at the very end of the service. I'll be running our Square app for today at the end of the service here at the front. And so if you have a credit card or a debit card and you'd prefer to give through those means, then you can come see me at the very end of our service here at the front, and we can get you donating through debit or through credit card as well. And so I just want to invite the ushers on forward as we have a quick word of prayer over these tithes and these offerings. God, I want to thank you so much for being so good to us, for blessing us so much. And God, we give back to you in response to your faithfulness, in response to your amazing grace. God, we just pray that you would bless these offerings and that it may go a long way to supporting the ministries that you have here through this church in this community. Amen.
Lord of all creation, of water, earth, and sky. The heavens are your tabernacle.
we sing our last song of the morning. 10,000 reasons. I have a friend that's really good at this, the gratitude thing, right? Doesn't matter what's going on. There's 10,000 reasons to be thankful. There's 10,000 reasons to bless the Lord. Join us as we sing. Bless the Lord, oh my soul.
Thank you so much, team. We just want to let you know that we do have kids classes available for those of you who are here, and so we have kids classes available 13 or 12 and under available to the left as you exit in the fellowship room, and the classes around there as well. And we do have kids classes available for those 13 and up in our boardroom to the right as you exit. So if you would like to be there, then you are welcome to head on over to there. And today we have one of my favorite speakers to listen to. He really is. Chet. I love when I get the chance to invite Chet on up and when he says yes, because it's amazing, and I know you're going to be blessed. So I just want to hand over this time to Chet.
Morning, church. Let's just start with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you very much for this Sabbath. Thank you for a chance for us to recharge and recuperate and check in with you, spending time in your presence. Lord, thank you for the worship service this morning. Lord, please soften our hearts and just prepare us to have an experience with you. We always want to leave this place feeling closer to you and knowing more about you than we did when we got here. Lord, help that to be the case today, and just be here with us, and we hope that you are glorified. Amen. Today, I want to talk about communication. How many of you have had a miscommunication? Occasionally. Yeah. It's pretty easy to have your words misinterpreted, and it's fairly easy to misinterpret the words of others as well. I think there's lots of reasons for this. I think it's also true that in today's world, it's becoming easier than ever to have miscommunications and breakdowns in communication. Because communication has changed drastically, even over the last 10 years. It used to be the case that to talk with somebody, you needed to be face-to-face with them. You needed to look them in the eye. You needed to be in the same room. You needed to actually speak words out loud. Because communication is change, communicate and share ideas, build relationship. Now they say that 70% of communication is nonverbal. It's implied through body language, through context, through facial expressions and the tone and sounds of your voice, rather than just the words that you're saying. And yet today, a huge amount of our communication happens not face-to-face, and not even through phone calls where we can at least hear inflections in tone of voice, but simply through written, typed out messages. Quite frequently, they even lack punctuation, or there's misspellings, or autocorrect does its part. And we end up with communication that's very easy to misinterpret. I was looking at examples of miscommunication on the internet, and I found a few funny examples I thought I'd share with you. This came from an article talking about international marketing executives in the 1990s and how there were lots of companies that were trying to expand their brands across borders to reach larger and larger bases of sales. But in translating their slogans, things didn't always go very well. For example, Coca-Cola was expanding to China. They chose a similar name for their brand. I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, but something like this, Kiku Kile. Unfortunately, they did not know until after they published that that was actually a phrase, and if you took those individual words, it meant, bite the wax, tadpole. After thousands of these signs had been printed and this had been distributed widely, they realized their mistake. They chose a close phonetic equivalent, Kiku Kule, which meant happiness in the mouth. A little better. Also in Chinese, Kentucky Fried Chicken slogan, finger licking good, came out as, eat your fingers off. In Taiwan, the translation of the Pepsi slogan, come alive with the Pepsi generation, very inspiring, came out as, Pepsi will bring your ancestors back from the dead. But even if we speak the same language, it's still easy to get things wrong. Today, Facebook has about 2.3 billion members. So that's 1 in every 3 people across the globe. Now that percentage is even higher here in North America. Every day, over 500 million comments are made on Facebook posts. Over 250 million statuses are updated. Over 160 million photos are uploaded. There is a greater access to communication than there has ever been in the history of the human race, and more people are frequently and furiously communicating than ever before. Words reach further, they get there faster. It's incredible. There's actually this one study that I read about. It was talking about the spread of information and how it has exponentially grown over the years. How it used to take decades for things to spread across the globe. Now it takes minutes. I remember when I was in college, there was a internet phenomenon called the Harlem Shake. Does any of you remember the Harlem Shake? It was a song that would play, and during the beginning of the song, everybody would be very calmly sitting there doing it. It was little internet videos. And then at some point, the beat dropped in the song, which is where it gets a lot more exciting. And all of a sudden, everybody would be dancing like crazy. It was these absurd videos. It doesn't sound that exciting or interesting, does it? But there was one video posted one night by one group of friends at some college in the States, and in less than 24 hours, there was tens of thousands of these being posted, and it became this international phenomenon, and it was unprecedented at the rate at which it spread. Now this has positives and negatives. In one way, it's exciting that we can reach across the world, that we can share ideas and emotions, and so many people can be involved to share experiences so quickly. But in another sense, I think it also has predisposed us to poor communication. Because we now live in a time where there is less required thought, effort, intention than ever before to quickly and efficiently say something to a huge, huge group of people. We often think very little before we post things. Another study actually showed that people are far more inclined to respond negatively when they are able to post something anonymously. This is why road rage is so common. You're in your car, you don't see the face of the person in the other vehicle. It's this anonymous interaction, and so our emotions, our negative emotions, are able to bubble up so much more quickly than if we were actually talking to that person face to face. The same thing happens on Facebook, when even if you can see a picture or a name, or maybe it's just a post on some group that you follow, it's very easy to feel anonymous and post something quickly in a far more negative way than you might have done if you were actually face to face with somebody. Now, I think these things are important. As a church, we are called to not be isolated, to not be shut in. We're called to communicate with the world. We're called to bring God's light and God's wisdom and God's love to a world that we believe needs it. But how we do that is often misinterpreted and miscommunicated. Sometimes our best intentions come across as bigoted, unloving, self-righteous. And it's not just our communication with people outside the church that we struggle with. Frequently, it's our communication with people inside the church. And often it surrounds difficult topics. In the last few years, a very important issue in the church, one that's been talked about very frequently, is women's ordination. And Facebook groups, Adventist churches were filled with conversations about women's ordination. And what might be a productive conversation in person often would devolve into name-calling, accusations, and attacks on character. And it's not just women's ordination, and today's sermon is not actually about any particular issue. And I want to make that very clear at the beginning. Today's sermon is not about women's ordination. It's not about abortion. It's not about sexuality. It's not about the Sabbath or how we keep it. It's not about how we play music in the church or any of those things. But I want to talk about how we talk about those things. Because have you noticed that it's very difficult to have conversations about those things? That when we try, usually we leave feeling hurt, bitter, angry, rather than feeling like we've made any sort of progress. Now there's lots of reasons for this, and we're going to talk about, to start off with, 2 of them. Then we're going to chat about a little bit about what we can do about it. Now, disclaimer, I am not a psychologist. I took one intro to psych course in undergrad. So naturally, I feel very confident talking about these things. But I am not qualified to talk about these things, and so we're going to talk a little bit about social psychology. If I'm talking about it completely wrong, feel free to come and chat with me about it afterwards. I'm very open to that. How many of you have heard of group polarization? So group polarization is the tendency for members of a group to hold much stronger opinions than they would as individuals. This has been studied extensively, and it's one of the reasons that people are predisposed to things like rioting. It's another way of thinking about it is mob mentality. Individual people might have an opinion. They might believe something. When you get a bunch of those people together as a group, and you put them all in the same place, their individual opinions amplify each other, and each one of them will actually feel much more strongly about whatever issue they feel about than they did before. Now, this affects us as a church in a huge, huge way. Naturally, as a church, we have something in common. The majority of the people in this church, well, not everybody, are Seventh-day Adventists. Plenty of you grew up in Seventh-day Adventist homes. I could stand up here and make jokes about fried chick and haystacks, and you would all get it and laugh. But if I made those same jokes anywhere else, nobody would laugh or get it at all. But we have this cultural background that unites us and makes us very similar. And even as individual churches, we tend to group with people that are like-minded. It used to be that churches were arranged geographically, so you would go to whatever church was closest. Now, that still tends to lump people together who are like-minded, because like-minded people tend to live in similar areas, you come from similar backgrounds and ethnicities. Now, the world today, of course, is much more globalized. People move to different countries frequently. You don't necessarily live in the same town that you grew up in, but nonetheless, we tend to group in like-minded bunches. In our own town of Kelowna, we have 7 Adventist churches. 7 churches that are, the members that attend them don't do so much because it's the church that's closest to them, but they do so because it's the church that most aligns with their own beliefs, their own ideas, their own preferences about musical style, their own preferences about worship or theology. The church is supposed to be this miraculous thing. You know, we believe the church is supposed to be filled with the Holy Spirit, that it's supposed to allow for loving communication and unity that wouldn't be possible without the Holy Spirit. But sometimes I wonder if the fact that we all get along in this building has more to do with the Holy Spirit, or if it has more to do with the fact that we've very carefully chosen a bunch of people that actually agree with us on most things. When we isolate ourselves from people that disagree with us, I think we remove part of that ability to have heavenly relationships that couldn't exist without God's Spirit. And as a group, as churches that are isolated, as churches that agree on things or disagree on things, we fall into this trap of group polarization, where our group, because we all agree on things, becomes more and more strongly entrenched in those specific beliefs. And their group, because they agree on things, also become more and more entrenched. And so in the process, we actually become further apart and more divided than before. Another concept from social psychology is called confirmation bias. This is the idea that we tend to listen to and agree with voices that suit our own opinions. Not a groundbreaking idea. This was first studied, or at least, publicly studied in the 1970s. There was a group of researchers that did a study. They had 2 groups of people. At the time, one of the big political issues was the death penalty, capital punishment. So they had one group of people that were advocating for the death penalty. They believed that this would be a deterrent to crime, and they had another group of people that were against the death penalty and believed it would not be a deterrent to crime. They took these 2 groups and they presented them with research articles. One of the articles was a study showing that the death penalty was in fact a great deterrent to crime, that crime went down after states adopted the death penalty. The other study was the opposite. It showed that states that had the death penalty actually had more crime than states that didn't. These two groups were presented with the exact same two pieces of evidence, and interestingly enough, both groups, when surveyed before and after, said that after reading the evidence, they felt more strongly than before in their previously held beliefs. Maybe this isn't too surprising to you, but when you really stop and think about it, that should be absurd. These are two groups of people with different ideas, shown the exact same evidence, and both of them coming to the conclusion, this evidence, when taken as a whole, supports my belief. And we do this. None of us are immune to this. None of us are absolved from this. You might be a wise person and very intelligent, but we all do this. We all tend to ignore evidence that disagrees with us and only listen to things that support our beliefs. And this is easier now than ever before. We live in the age of social media. We live in the age where our Facebook collects data about us, learns our desires, learns our tendencies, our political leanings, how we feel about social issues, and then actually filters the things we see that are going to best reach us and make us want to click on that and listen to that. So it's not even a fair fight anymore, because when you log on to not just Facebook, but even advertisements you're shown on any website, it has been perfectly and specifically tailored to you to feed you what you already believe and what you want to hear. It gets to be more and more difficult to really honestly analyze your own opinions and beliefs. And these are huge challenges in how we communicate and discuss difficult topics. Because after all of this, after reading inflammatory, immediate responsive comments on Facebook, after being in our isolated groups where we're polarized in our opinions, after having all of these access to information that is filtered to only tell us what we want to know, when it actually comes to the time to have a conversation with somebody, let's just say we're not exactly getting a head start. There's a lot of challenges to overcome. So what do we do about it? Now, these points today about how to fix this, of course, there's no easy fix. There's nothing I can tell you today that's going to make all of your communications so much simpler and easier going home. I think one thing we can do is at least be aware of these things, because to talk about them, to think about them, helps us maybe identify those things in our own lives, in our own thinking. But there are a few things we can talk about. Our first point today is listen first to understand. Proverbs 18, verse 13 says, "He who answers before listening, that is his folly and his shame." Proverbs 18:2, I like this one, says, "A fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinions." There's an author, Alan Jacobs, he wrote a book called, I don't remember actually what it's called, something about the power of thinking well, or correct thinking. But he had an interview on CBC, and I was listening to this interview, and I picked up his book and I've been reading through it. And he talks about these traps that we fall into with our thinking, with our communication, and he shared some really wonderful examples. One of these comes from a very famous and well-known debate club in New York City that you can attend. He said he attended one of their debates, and he was struck by the simplicity of how they began their debates. They begin every debate the same way. Of course, a debate involves two parties with opposing views, presenting their case, arguing their case, and trying to convince the other person that they're right. But he said before the debate could begin, both parties had to present not their own views to the audience, they had to introduce their opponent's views to the audience in a way that their opponent would agree with. So you weren't allowed to present some skewed version of what they believe or some absurd or exaggerated version. You had to clearly be able to understand it and explain it to the group so the other person would say, yes, that is what I believe. And the debate could not start until both parties had done that. Because they understand something that we need to understand, and that is that you cannot have meaningful conversation or make any progress unless you actually understand what the other person or the other group is trying to say. And we don't do this very often. Usually we make assumptions. Usually we jump to conclusions very, very rapidly. One conversation that I've had many times in my life, where I feel like I've been guilty of this, is conversations around music in the church. My parents believed that it was very important for my sister and I to play instruments. Piano lessons did not go well for me. And so they said, fine, but you have to pick an instrument and you have to take lessons and you have to learn an instrument. So I said drums, which I'm sure was just the worst case scenario for them. And my dad tried to convince me to play bass guitar instead. But I was very set on playing the drums. And to their credit, they bought me a drum set. And never once in my life did they ever ask me to not practice or to quiet down, which is remarkable. Yeah, they did, that's true. But being a drummer growing up in the Adventist church, of course, you talk about music a lot. And sometimes you talk about it because you want to, sometimes you talk about it because people want to talk to you about it. I remember one case in particular. I was playing with Errol's. Pastor Errol was the chaplain of the Christian Academy here in town for a number of years. He now pastors another church up north in BC. But growing up, we played lots of music with Pastor Errol. And we would frequently play at camp meeting here in BC. One summer, we were practicing for the evening meeting, and we were playing our music, no different from any other practice, when a lady came into the tent. And she politely waited for us to finish our song. And then she stepped up to speak to us, and she said, I just need to tell you that the music you're playing will not be in heaven. And it is the music of clubs, and it is the music of bars, and it does not belong here. Now, to her credit, she was actually I thought she was kind of sweet about it. She had this sincerity where it didn't seem like she hated us. She just if you believe somebody's about to eat a piece of food that's poisoned, you've got to tell them, you can't eat that, that's bad for you. And I felt like she had this sincere and caring belief that she needed to tell us. And I'm sure it took a lot of guts and a lot of courage to come up to us and approach us and share this with us. I'm sure that wasn't easy. Of course, I could be wrong. Maybe she really enjoyed doing that. That's also very possible. I don't know. But at the time, I think I made the assumption, oh, she's just one of those legalistic, self-righteous people. And how easy is it for us to do that? To take one thing somebody says and extrapolate accusations about their character, about their beliefs, about the person that they are, based on one thing just because you disagree with them. But we do this all the time. And so when we try to have a conversation about it, we're not just having a conversation about music anymore. Now we're having a conversation that involves my assumption that they're legalistic, that they believe God is an angry, vengeful God. How did I jump to that from the fact that she didn't like the music I was playing? But it's so easy to do. This idea, this fallacy is called the straw man argument. And it's the idea that many of the disagreements you have, many of the arguments and conversations you have, the two people, they're not even arguing about the same thing. They think they are, but person A doesn't even understand person B's point of view, so you're attacking this point of view that they don't even hold. It doesn't even exist. It's a figment of your imagination. So you're fighting against the straw man rather than the steel man. Alan Jacobs calls this the technique that this New York debate club used, where they had to explain each other's point of view. He calls it the steel man argument, where you make sure that before you start, you actually understand what you're debating about. Now, I'm not going to tell you today that you shouldn't have disagreements. It's going to happen, and some of them are extraordinarily valid and important to have. It's great that you have strong opinions, that you believe what you believe and you know why you believe it. But I think sometimes we're afraid that if we actually listen to someone long enough and we try to understand their point of view, that we're going to accidentally agree with them or become like them. I think that's just foolishness, and we can't have many conversations unless we understand what they actually believe. So our first point, listen first to understand. Number 2, seek truth, not victory. Alan Jacobs shares another anecdote. All of the Ivy League schools in the States have political clubs, political unions. And those clubs are actually powerful clubs. Not only do they have an effect on politics, but lots of young and aspiring, whether it's lobbyists, lawmakers, politicians, all these different people. Lots of them come from these clubs and build social connections, accumulate friendships, relationships, and even knowledge through these sorts of clubs. It's a great way to start off your career or your life if you happen to be one of these people that's attending one of these Ivy League schools. Yale University is no different, and they have their own political society, which is a very prestigious group to be a part of. Of course, they're not welcoming to all comers. You have to go through an interview process. Part of this interview process, they ask you a series of questions. One of them they ask is, have you ever broken somebody on the floor? Now, that's a debate term. In debate, breaking somebody on the floor means you have so convincingly and thoroughly made your own case that they've been forced to agree with you. It's like the ultimate victory in debate. And whether the person says yes or no, and they might quite proudly say yes and be eager to share a story of when that happened, truthfully, the Yale Political Society doesn't actually care. The second question they ask is, have you ever been broken on the floor? And that's the question that matters. And Alan Jacobs says that unless the answer to that question is yes, you are not going to get into the Yale Political Society. Because if you've never been broken on the floor, if you've been in debate club through high school and undergrad, if you've been doing those things for a long time and you've never been broken on the floor, there are two options. Either one, you've never been wrong, which is very unlikely, or number two, you have been wrong, but you are unwilling or unable to understand when you're wrong and admit it. And the Yale Political Society values that its members are able to assess their own beliefs, understand when they've made a mistake, and change their mind. Sometimes in conversations, you'll hear people use phrases like, "There is nothing you could do to convince me of that." If you've ever said that, that's a mistake. There should be something they could do or say. You should always be open to understanding. And if you really believe what you're saying, then that's not a weakness or a danger for you to do. But being open to changing your mind is incredibly important. If you don't have at least the possibility of changing your mind, if you couldn't possibly be convinced of anything except for what you already believe, then there is no way you're going to have meaningful conversation or make any progress in any sort of difficult discussion. And it's not so surprising that we do this. In fact, so many of the words we use to talk about conversation are metaphors for combat. We use things like attacking that point, or defending your position, or giving a counterpoint, or having victory, or winning an argument, or being defeated. And so we take those things and we carry them over into when we have conversations, and very quickly it's easy for our goal to become winning rather than actually seeking the truth, understanding. Our third point, so one was listen first to understand. Oh, and actually one thing I forgot to say, one very practical way to do that, and this sounds cheesy, but a very practical way to do that is when somebody says something to you, you can use the phrase, "What I hear you saying is." And when you first start doing that, it feels super robotic and awkward because you're not used to speaking that way and you feel like you're reading from a script. And truthfully, when you start, you are, because those aren't your words, it's not a natural flow of conversation. But if you can make that a habit, it is so helpful because the other person is either going to say, "No, that's not what I'm saying," in which case, good thing you tried to clarify because you've at least avoided one of those mistakes. Or they're going to say, "Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying." And then you can start to actually talk about it. But if you can start with that, and it doesn't have to be those exact words, sometimes it can be something like, "So I'm trying to understand what you believe. I think I do. Is this correct?" But if you can start your conversations from that place, you will have so much more success in them. So listen first to understand. Number 2, seek truth, not victory. And number 3, seek peace. 1 Peter 3:11 says, "He must turn from evil and do good. He must seek peace and pursue it." I think often we think of peace as being passive. passive. We think of peace as something that comes when we do nothing. As peace is like the absence of action. But the Bible says peace is something we pursue. Oftentimes that means it's running away. And it's going to take some work for us to get it. Peace doesn't always come easily, and sometimes we can leave after a conversation feeling kind of broken or not feeling good about it. And if we don't actually pursue peace, we won't have it. But the Bible says pursue peace. Proverbs 15:1 says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Romans 14:19 says, so then let us pursue what makes for peace and for mutual upbuilding. Ephesians 4:15 and 16 says, rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, for whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. I think one of the reasons we hate having difficult conversations is because we've all had experiences where we've had a conversation, and afterwards you just don't feel good about it. You don't leave feeling better, you don't leave feeling edified or encouraged, you just leave feeling like either angry or bitter or upset. My wife has many sisters. And her sisters, two of them are married. And so I've acquired two brother-in-laws through my wife's family. Now, Laura and her sisters have married tremendously different men. If you put myself and my two brother-in-laws in a group together, you would see we have very little in common. We are incredibly different people. We disagree on most things that are anything political or social or ethical or moral. We have very different ideas about. In fact, the only thing that we have in common is that all three of us are very stubborn and strong-willed. So whenever we're all in the same place, we end up having conversations. The last time we were together, it was about assisted suicide. And it actually got pretty heated. And I remember saying some really stupid things, because when you're having a conversation with somebody, even if you sort of kind of thought something before, during the conversation, that kind of thought transforms into this, I believe this with all my heart and all my mind. And I will defend this no matter what, even though you didn't care that much about it a few minutes ago. And this was the case. And at the end of the conversation, I honestly just didn't feel that good going to bed. I was worried that I'd given the wrong impression, that through this conversation, I'd really left them feeling that I didn't really respect them very much, or didn't think they were very smart, or I just didn't like them, or something like that. And it's easy to think that somebody else feels that way about you. And so we end up leaving these conversations feeling terrible. So the next time we were all together, we were talking about social assistance programs, and it was getting equally heated and exciting. And I knew I had regretted how the previous conversation had ended. So my heart was beating fast, but I stopped the conversation and I said, I just want to tell you that even though we disagree on this, I respect you all, I love you, and I think you're very smart, even if I don't see things your way. And it felt like I was reading from a movie script. It didn't feel natural, or it wasn't comfortable to say. But the tension in the room disappeared, and I just felt so good going to bed that night. We hadn't agreed on anything more, and my sense of peace or bitterness after these conversations had nothing to do with whether we agreed or disagreed. It had to do with the fact that I had, in the one case, not taken the time to edify that relationship, and in the other case, had taken that effort, even though it was uncomfortable to say, I love you guys, and I think you're smart, even if I think what you believe is stupid. And that made all the difference. And it's a habit that I've been trying to build and do better. Conversations aren't easy, and the world is full of difficult topics, and we struggle with conversing with people outside the church. We struggle with conversing with people inside the church. You might have a difficult conversation on your drive home from church, or sitting around the table eating lunch today. It might be with your coworkers this week. We all get into these spots where we disagree. I'm not telling you that you have to agree, I'm not saying that you have to weaken your opinions or make accommodations or change how you believe about things. But 3 things you can always do. You can listen first to understand. You can seek truth instead of just looking for a victory. And you can always seek peace and love in those conversations. My hope and my prayer for you today, and I'll invite the team, I think it's Sabrina's group that's coming up to do our closing song. My hope and my prayer for you today is that you will take some time to reflect on these things, to think about your own conversations and disagreements, and that in the future, maybe you would think about some of these things and be able to have these conversations that we find so tough. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this Sabbath. Thank you for being a God who is willing to sit and talk with us. Lord, it is all too easy for us to believe that we know exactly what you want and what you think. God, please put humility in our hearts and gentleness, that even when we do disagree, we'd be able to do so lovingly. Lord, help us to always have conversations that build up the church and that strengthen the love we have for one another. Lord, help us to do those things, and in doing so, draw closer to you and just be the body of Christ that we're meant to be. Lord, please bless us today, and thank you. Amen.
How I live for the moments
That is, the song is called Touch of Heaven. It's from Hillsong's newest album that just came out. And we're featuring it today because we want you to get familiar with it. That's going to be our theme song for our coming series starting on May 12th. Our series entitled The Kingdom is Here. And during that series, we're going to be exploring something really cool that we've been studying. And it's the Old Testament symbols and how they parallel with the life that Jesus lived, and how it shows us and demonstrates that Jesus had brought the kingdom here and now. And how it shows us that the kingdom is here, the kingdom is now, and how it starts with us. And before you go today, we want to let you know a couple of things, a couple of ways that you can connect with us. Through the first thing we want to let you know about is Adventist World Aviation's 3rd annual spring open house. And this is Sunday, May 6th. From 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. There's going to be a barbecue lunch there available for about $10. It starts at 11 a.m. is the barbecue lunch. There's going to be multiple aircrafts on display. There's going to be some door prizes and some raffles as well. And if you don't know what AWA is, what Adventist World Aviation is, it is the amazing ministry that does a couple of missions around the world. They have different bases, and they do life-saving flights. And so they are the group that we partner with together, Sun Valley and OCS, Okanagan Christian School. We partner with them to send our youth down to Nicaragua to help build a bridge and to help support this mission base. So go on out and support AWA's 3rd annual spring open house. That's May 6th from 10 to 2 p.m. at the Kelowna Flying Club near Kelowna International Airport. One more thing, a couple things we want to announce as well, but one thing that I'm sure some of you have heard throughout this week, that unfortunately Don Quiring had a medical issue, and unfortunately he has passed away on Tuesday. And so we're just asking that you would please keep the family in your prayers, keep Glenda in your prayers as they go through this very difficult time. She wanted me to pass on this message to you, and it says, we would be honored by your presence at the memorial service for our beloved Don Quiring, fondly remembered as DQ. The memorial service will be held outdoors on the grounds of the Gushigan House and Gardens, 1060 Cameron Avenue in Kelowna, off Gordon Drive, on Friday, May 4th at 4 p.m. It says guests are requested to arrive early so that the service may begin promptly at 4 p.m. And they say, please do not bring any food or refreshments, as this will all be provided. And they ask if you could please RSVP through rsvpdq2018 at gmail.com. Or text 250-212-4500. So if you would like to RSVP, if you're planning on going, please either text that number or send an email to rsvpdq2018 at gmail.com and let them know if you're planning on coming. We'll leave that up, actually. If we let's just not change the graphics as for the last two announcements. We'll just leave that up so that people can write that down and if they're planning on going. The next thing we want to let you know about is our spring potluck. And our spring potluck, our church potluck is going to be May 26th, right after church. And so you're all invited to join us after church on May 26th for our annual spring potluck. We ask that you would bring a dish and invite your friends as well, as there's usually plenty of food to go around. And our final announcement is our Summer Sun Groups. And our Summer Sun Groups is a small commitment, or a short, that's the word I'm looking for, a short, small group commitment throughout the summer, and it's a really fun opportunity to get to know people and to do amazing things. And so our Summer Sun Groups works like this. If you are interested in anything in the summer, if you like playing tennis, if you like going kayaking, or biking, or hiking, or running, or eating food, whatever it is that you enjoy doing in the summer, and you want to invite other people to do it along with you to help us build community, then we just ask that you would contact me, and we can help you starting a small group for 6 weeks in July and August, or July and August. And so it's a short-term commitment small group that lets you get to know some of your family, some of your friends here in Sun Valley, and get to do some amazing things through the beautiful Kelowna summers that we have. So if you're interested in starting a small group or learning more, please feel free to contact me. I want to let you know as well that the Square app is available at the very end of the service here up front with myself, where you can give through either debit or through credit card. And I just want to leave you with this very final benediction. And it says, may the God who clearly communicates that you are loved, that you are important, that you are precious. May the God that has placed worth in you and has asked you to share that love and to share that message with others, may that God bless you and guide you. May you have a wonderful rest of your weekend, a wonderful rest of your Sabbath, and I want to thank you so much for choosing to worship with us here at Sun Valley. Amen. 4566. That's the number. Thank you.
You